close your eyes for a moment and imagine the most electrifying human being you have ever seen on a stage. Not just singing, but becoming the music. Spinning, dropping to his knees, hitting notes that seem to come from somewhere beyond this world, moving his body with the precision of a boxer and the grace of a ballet dancer, holding an entire arena in the palm of his hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. That was Jackie Wilson. That was the man they called Mr. Excitement. Berry Gordy, the man who built Motown, once said he was the greatest singer he ever heard. Smokey Robinson called him the most dynamic singer and performer he had ever seen. Michael Jackson dedicated his 1984 Grammy win to him. Elvis Presley borrowed moves from him. The man was not just talented, he was supernatural. And yet, on the night of September 29, 1975, at a small venue in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, while the audience clapped and cheered, thinking the moment was part of the show, Jackie Wilson fell face first onto a stage and never truly got back up again. What happened to this man and what was done to him is one of the most painful, most enraging, most heartbreaking stories that the history of black music has ever produced. He was born Jack Leroy Wilson Jr. on June 9, 1934, in the Highland Park neighborhood of Detroit, Michigan, a small, dense enclave of the city where survival was a daily negotiation. His father, Jack Wilson Sr., was an alcoholic, frequently absent, rarely employed, and gone from the household entirely by the time young Jackie was 9 years old. His mother, Eliza May, was his anchor, a church choir singer who took her boy to Billups Chapel and placed him in front of a piano and in front of a congregation and let the music find him. It found him immediately. By the time he was 6, Jackie was singing in church. By 10, he was singing gospel and blues on Detroit street corners. The voice was already something that stopped people mid-step. But the streets of Highland Park were also shaping him in ways that the church could not always counter. He joined a gang called the Shakers. He started drinking, not as a teenager, but at the age of 9 years old, spending the money his gospel quartet earned on cheap wine. He was sent to the Lansing Juvenile Detention Center twice before he was 16. He dropped out of high school at 15. On paper, this was a boy the world had already written off. But inside that same boy was a voice, a 4-octave tenor that belonged to no category, that could move from the deepest gospel moan to the highest, purest falsetto in a single breath. During his second stint in juvenile detention, he learned to box, and that training would become the secret architecture of his stage presence, the footwork, the speed, the physical command of a body that never stopped moving. His mother pushed him away from the ring, and so Jackie Wilson poured every ounce of that aggression, that athleticism, that raw animal energy directly into song. In 1953, still barely a man, he joined Billy Ward and his Dominoes as lead singer, stepping into a role previously held by the great Clyde McPhatter. Nobody thought he could fill those shoes. He didn't fill them. He outgrew them. By 1957, Jackie Wilson was a solo artist, signed to Brunswick Records, and the world was about to be introduced to something it had never experienced before.
Reet Petite in 1957, then To Be Loved, then Lonely Teardrops in 1958, his first #1, written by a young Detroit songwriter named Berry Gordy Jr., who would take the royalties he earned from Jackie Wilson's success and use them as the seed money to build Motown Records. Think about that. The very engine that launched Motown was fueled by Jackie Wilson's voice. Then came Night in 1960, Baby Workout in 1963, and in 1967, the transcendent Your Love Keeps Lifting Me Higher and Higher, a song so joyful, so spiritually uplifting, so perfectly constructed that it sounds as alive today as the day it was recorded. 50 hit singles, 16 top 10 R&B hits, 6 #1s. He was the first black solo artist to consistently cross over from the R&B charts onto the mainstream pop charts, crashing through walls that the music industry had spent decades reinforcing. Michael Jackson studied his moonwalk, his spins, his knee drops. Prince absorbed his showmanship. Elvis Presley watched him and understood what a body could do when it truly surrendered to the music. Jackie Wilson was not just a singer.
He was the blueprint. And yet, while all of this was happening, while the crowds screamed and the records sold and the television appearances multiplied, something deeply corrupt was unfolding behind closed doors. His manager, a man named Nat Tarnopol, had maneuvered himself into a position of complete financial control over Jackie Wilson's life. Tarnopol held power of attorney over Jackie's finances. He controlled the contracts, the royalties, the money in and the money out. And what he did with that control was steal. Brunswick Records under Tarnopol was shipping hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of records and never putting those shipments on the books, which meant the artists never received royalty payments on those sales. Jackie Wilson was the label's biggest star. He was also its most robbed. By 1975, while Jackie was reduced to performing on the oldies circuit just to survive, Tarnopol and 18 other Brunswick executives were indicted on federal charges of mail fraud and tax evasion. The indictment stated that Tarnopol owed Jackie Wilson at least $1 million in unpaid royalties. $1 million. And at that same moment, Jackie Wilson could not pay his bills. He died owing an estimated $300,000 to the IRS alone, taxes he believed his manager had been paying on his behalf for years, because that was what he was told, and because this was a black man in the music industry in the 1950s and 1960s, and trust was sometimes the only contract that mattered. That trust destroyed him. On September 29, 1975, Jackie Wilson was on stage at the Latin Casino in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, not at Madison Square Garden, not at a sold-out arena, but at a nostalgia revue organized by Dick Clark called the Good Old Rock and Roll Revue. He was 41 years old. He had not had a major hit in 8 years. He was broke. But he was still Jackie Wilson, still moving, still commanding, still giving everything he had to an audience that had once worshipped him. He was singing Lonely Teardrops, the very song that had launched his solo career 17 years earlier. And on the words, "My heart is crying," those specific words, at that specific moment, as if the universe itself was writing the cruelest poetry imaginable, Jackie Wilson suffered a massive heart attack and collapsed to the stage floor. The audience applauded. They thought it was part of the show. They had seen him do things on stage that no other human being could do. Of course, this was part of the act. But Dick Clark, watching from the side, sensed something was horribly wrong and ordered the musicians to stop. Cornell Gunter of the Coasters, backstage, rushed to Jackie's side and found him not breathing. Gunter performed resuscitation. He brought Jackie back. Medical teams worked for nearly 30 minutes to stabilize his vital signs, but the damage was already done. The lack of oxygen to his brain during those critical minutes had already taken something that could never be returned. Jackie Wilson slipped into a coma. He briefly emerged in early 1976, enough to take a few unsteady steps, and then slipped back under. For the remaining 8 years of his life, he was entirely helpless. He could not speak. He could not walk. He could not sing. The man whose body had been a breathtaking instrument, whose every movement had made audiences lose their minds, lay still and silent in a series of care facilities in New Jersey, completely dependent on others for everything. And those others did not always treat him with the dignity he deserved. Reports of neglect inside those facilities circulated among the people who loved him. The lawsuit to recover his stolen royalties never happened because Jackie was lying in a nursing home semi-comatose and could not pursue it. Tarnopol's conviction was overturned on appeal. The money was never recovered. The man who had made millions of dollars for an industry that consumed him was left with nothing. Not his health, not his freedom, not a single cent. It was Dick Clark, the man who had been promoting the show the night Jackie collapsed, who quietly stepped in and paid Jackie Wilson's medical bills for all 8 years of his coma. Not the record label, not the manager. Dick Clark, a gesture of human decency so rare in that industry that it stands out like a single lit candle in a very dark room. On January 21st, 1984, Jackie Wilson died at a hospital in Mount Holly, New Jersey. He was 49 years old. He was buried in Detroit, the city that made him and broke him and never quite gave him what he deserved while he was alive. 3 years later, in 1987, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducted him.
In 2004, Rolling Stone magazine ranked him 69th on their list of the 100 greatest artists of all time. The tributes came, the recognition came. It always comes too late for the ones who needed it most.
Jackie Wilson gave this world a voice that didn't just entertain, it transformed the very foundation of popular music. Before the polish of Motown, before the global superstardom of Michael Jackson, before the cultural dominance of crossover soul, there was Jackie Wilson, electrifying, fearless, and impossibly alive on stage. His voice could soar, crack, whisper, and explode all in a single performance. His movement was just as powerful. He didn't just sing songs, he became them. Artists like Elvis Presley watched him, studied him, admired him. Michael Jackson built an entire performance language on the blueprint Jackie left behind. But while the world took everything he offered, the energy, the innovation, the soul, it gave very little back when it mattered most. Behind the applause was exploitation, financial mismanagement, and an industry that profited from his brilliance without protecting his future. When tragedy struck and Jackie Wilson collapsed on stage in 1975, slipping into a coma that would last for years, the same world that once cheered him grew quiet. The man who had once filled theaters and shaped generations was left with an empty bank account and a life reduced to silence. When he passed away in 1984, even in death, the neglect followed him. His grave in Detroit went without a proper headstone for years, a heartbreaking symbol of how easily greatness can be forgotten when the spotlight fades. Some stories don't end with redemption. Some don't offer comfort. The story of Jackie Wilson is one of brilliance unmatched and loss that should never have happened. It is a reminder of how the industry and the audience can take everything from an artist and give nothing back when they fall. The least we can do now, the very least, is remember him, not as a footnote, not as a forgotten influence, but as a giant. Say his name like it matters, because it does.